Hey there, it's Tom Jordan. Nice to have you. Hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving holiday. And I expected the president to pardon a couple turkeys, but I think he took it to the next level. Before we get into that, I want you to be reminiscent of this.
Is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No.
Well,
I just said no. I just answered. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes,
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
yes. I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
Does the president have any intention of pardoning him?
We've been asked that question multiple times. Our answer stands, which is no.
Well, the answer clearly no longer stands because it is no longer no. President Biden has pardoned his son for his many crimes and his many alleged crimes, and for any crime he may have committed at any time for anything over the past 10 years. Even ones that no one has charged him with are ones that most people would be completely unaware of. It's total blanket immunity for the very privileged son of a family that is clearly far above the law, like way, way up there. No law can touch Hunter Biden. If you stole a lollipop in 2014, look the other way. You killed a guy, move on. You can't charge my boy with any of those crimes, no matter what it was. You can't touch him. That's just the way it is now with Hunter Biden, at least for the previous 10 years. That's what President Biden just did yesterday over the Thanksgiving holiday. He didn't just pardon a couple of turkeys. He went way up there. He pardoned a guy that directly links Joe Biden to massive accusations of pay-to-play schemes involving Russia and Ukraine and Uzbekistan and Romania and China. And the accusations include the Biden family reaping tens of millions of dollars from these overseas deals while President Biden was vice president, and even met with these individuals with his son, by the way. And he lied about that too when he said he knew nothing about these businesses or the people behind them. And yet he met with these people, those same individuals, over the phone and in person, even when they were meeting about these business deals. Those business dealings apparently began, by the way, in 2014. That happens to be the same year that this blanket pardon begins for Hunter Biden, 2014. Anything Hunter has done since January of 2014 is now off limits. He started working for Burisma, that Ukrainian energy firm, I think it was March of 2014. So this is when a lot of the money started pouring in, and all the work for these overseas entities started working out. Those deals were coming together after a few years of bargaining and whatnot. So the pardon itself, this is totally unprecedented. It's full and unconditional, covering potential crimes going back to 2014. And critics are out there. They're all over the place, and they're arguing that the move solidifies what they see as a two-tier justice system, one for the Bidens and another for the rest of America. Earlier this year, Hunter Biden pleaded guilty to tax fraud after failing to pay taxes while he was indulging in a very lavish lifestyle, including drugs, escorts, and luxury items as well. He was convicted of 3 felony gun charges also for lying about his drug addiction on a federal firearm form. A lot of people have gone to prison for doing just that for like 3 years. And in the midst of all of this, a lot of broken promises now, as of yesterday. Even, Chuck Grassley, he's a Republican senator, but he expressed shock about this. He was on Twitter and he tweeted that, shame on me for believing Biden's public statements. Yeah, I guess I would have heaped some shame on you too, because he's demonstrably lied over so many other issues and over the years. There's the House Oversight Chairman James Comer. He slammed the pardon as part of the Biden family's cover-up scheme, emphasizing that Hunter's charges were only just the tip of the iceberg in a pattern of alleged corruption and influence peddling that I just touched on overseas. Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan, he connected the pardon to the Republicans' impeachment inquiry and all the evidence that they brought out during that inquiry that was being buried by the Department of Justice, that the charges that Hunter faced were directly tied to GOP investigations into Biden family business dealings because, again, the Democratic-led Department of Justice would not investigate. In fact, they inhibited the investigation. They prevented it. They derailed it as much as they could. And the allegation is that Hunter shared profits with his father, referring to Biden as the boss of the crime family. That's how Comer painted him, and claimed the contents of Hunter Biden's infamous laptop all spelled it all out there, all the emails, all the messages, and the documentation and the evidence that points to a massive criminal enterprise by the Joe Biden family. And then you got the whistleblowers out there. Remember them, the guys with the IRS agents, Gary Shapley and Joe Ziegler. And they had exposed what had, first of all, the crimes that Hunter Biden committed, and also the political interference by the Biden administration in those investigations. They tried to derail them, and they decried this pardon as, again, special privilege for the very powerful. And that Hunter admitted to tax crimes in federal court, but that didn't matter. They still try to derail that investigation, and now he's been pardoned from those very crimes. Donald Trump has a reaction as well. The president-elect, of course, condemned the pardon as a blatant miscarriage of justice, and contrasting it, by the way, with the treatment of January 6 defendants. He criticized the DOJ as weaponized to protect Democrats while targeting political opponents, which has been evidenced over the past several years, including the charges against Donald Trump, which were far less serious than these ones against Hunter Biden, by the way. So there's dissent among Democrats, too. Some Democrats are chiming in, including Representative Greg Stanton and also the governor of Colorado. He's a far leftist. His name is Jared Polis, at the Capitol there in Denver, Colorado. Governor Polis. They both criticize Biden's decision, warning it sets a dangerous precedent and tarnishes the president's reputation, which I think has already been tarnished. But Polis argued that the move placed family loyalty above national duty. So there's critics across the political spectrum. They view the pardon as emblematic of this two-tiered justice system where powerful families escape accountability, while ordinary citizens or conservatives, who might be powerful as well, face the full and beyond the full extent, the weight of the law. So that is an update on this Manic Monday. Not fully surprising. I mean, when he was saying that back a few months ago that he wasn't going to pardon his son, did you really believe that he meant what he said? So apparently they gathered over the weekend, he and the family, and, he was concerned for his son. But, okay. He's probably concerned about himself as well, because this helps him skirt potential justice as well, as it does for the entire Biden family that was involved in the tens of millions of dollars that came through. I wonder if anyone will ever be brought to justice for that, putting the United States in harm's way so the Bidens could make millions of dollars. Those are the accusations that will probably never now be fully investigated. They tried, but they didn't complete it. All right. In a moment, we're also going to get into Michigan's lame duck session, which has become a battlefield of sorts over some policies that test the boundaries of fairness, common sense, and accountability. These proposals to grant driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants, illegal immigrants, can now get a license in the state of Michigan, driver's license, which means you can probably vote, which means you can probably get a job, and you're going to be here forever, is what the real goal here is. So that's something that's going through the legislature, has to go through by the end of this month, while Democrats still have control of the House and the Senate, of course, and the governor's office. They also want to loosen restrictions on changing legal gender markets based on how you feel. I feel like a woman today, so I want you to change what my gender is on my driver's license and identification and whatnot. Also, they want to complicate efforts to remove obscene books from libraries, pornographic material. They want to make it very difficult to do that. It's a stark divide between far leftists and the values of everyday citizens. So the far leftists have a few days left in office, so they want to jam this through, and it's happening right now, trying to squeeze in these radical laws before the end of this month, which undermines rule of law, parental rights. We'll get into that as well. And, of course, community standards. That is coming up in just a few seconds. Also, just a reminder here, chime in, comment, ask questions. I want to hear from you today. I'll get back and I'll answer questions or respond to your comments in the comments section of wherever you're watching, whether it's on X or on YouTube or on Facebook. Also, the reminder that the podcast lives on Spotify and Apple Podcast in perpetuity, as I like to say. I'll get to those comments in just a few moments as well. Also, the best way you can help us here at Tom Jordan Live, subscribe to our channels, watch the videos, share them as much as you can, and click that notification bell so we can alert you when something new pops up. That helps a lot. And if you want to go on Patreon and help us out there as well, you can. Patreon, we have a subscription-based model there, and it's Tom Jordan Live on Patreon. All right, here we go. During the current lame duck session, several legislative proposals are under consideration in the state of Michigan. Number one, driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. So this legislation has been introduced to allow undocumented residents to obtain driver's licenses. And supporters argue that this would enhance road safety and provide access to essential services for illegal immigrants. Make sure that they're providing, road safety. If you give an illegal immigrant a driver's license, there's already been examples where they've killed people on the road. So I don't know how it enhances road safety. Maybe it makes them legal instead of just driving a car illegally, which would open them up to being pulled over and prosecuted if they didn't have a driver's license. But now we're legalizing all of it, is what they want to do. Opponents express a lot of concerns about the legal and the security implications as well by providing illegal immigrants' driver's licenses. Then there's the gender marker changes on birth certificates. These proposed bills aim to simplify the process for individuals to change the gender marker, their sex, on their birth certificates, which would potentially would not require medical documentation. Okay, that's normally what you would have to do to kind of prove that you're a different sex. But no, it's just based on what you say, how you feel. This initiative really does seek to align legal documents with individuals' gender identities, though it has sparked debate over the implications for record accuracy and also societal norms as well. Number 3 on this, X gender option on driver's licenses. Like you don't have to pick a sex. This legislation is being considered to introduce a non-binary X option for gender, for sex on driver's licenses, providing, they say recognition for individuals who do not identify strictly as a male or a female. Again, it comes down to the identity, not on science, on biologically what you are, which of course would undermine, I think, public safety. How do you identify the person? We can't tell you if it's a male or a female because, it just says X. Okay, so the measure reflects this growing, I guess, acknowledgement of gender diversity, but has faced opposition from a lot of people who are concerned about administrative challenges and privileges and the broader societal impacts, not to mention the difficulty for law enforcement to track an individual who might be a danger to the public. The fourth thing is the restrictions are removing obscene books from libraries. This is a big deal. There's a proposed bill that would require a court order before local libraries can remove books deemed obscene, pornographic. You got to go to court. You can't be a librarian and say, okay, there's full-on pornography here, but I'm not allowed to remove that because people don't want me to ban books. That's the argument. And the proponents say that this protects against censorship. While critics obviously contend it could limit the community's ability to manage content accessible to kids. So the outcomes of all of these debates are going to significantly influence Michigan's legal and social landscape. And then there's a big one as well, an expansion of what's known as the Elliott-Larsen Act. We got to get into this, which you will. This is the civil rights law in Michigan that prevents discrimination based on gender, sex, which has already been expanded last year to include gender identity. Well, now the Democrats in Michigan want to pass legislation that if somebody perceives that certain words are intimidating to them based on their gender identity, then the perpetrator of those words could be charged with hate speech. And the language in this bill is so vague as it would probably allow different legal interpretations and put some people in prison. That's the argument here. So let's get into this. I spoke with Eileen McNeil with the Citizens for Traditional Values. Eileen McNeil is the president of Citizens for Traditional Values. Eileen, it's nice to have you back on the program. Appreciate your time.
Sure, happy to be here.
I would imagine that you'd be a bit aghast at the lack of legislation right now that reflects traditional American values that's under consideration right now and up for a vote in the state House and Senate, aren't you?
Yeah, very, very much so, especially considering this last election where voters very clearly let these candidates know enough with the crazy, enough. And yet there's a lame duck session coming up that has several very disturbing bills that we're concerned about at Citizens for Traditional Values that we're going to encourage people to call their legislators and email them. And, they're counter to all of our values.
Yeah, and just real quickly, I want to give people your website. It's just make sure I got it, ctvmichigan.org. And you can go to ctvmichigan.org if you want to get the contact information for your various legislators and people you can call based on our discussion here. So, and I know you'll bring out some numbers here too, which we want to share. I want to get into some of these pieces of legislation that are up for consideration. One of them is a sex education bill, and the Michigan House Democrats are pushing this very, very hard to get this through, and it dramatically would expand sex education, totally contrary to what would be traditional values. Topics like gender identity would be discussed and taught, sexual orientation taught to these little kids, contraceptive access, while completely eschewing and getting rid of the whole idea of abstinence as a mechanism to prevent pregnancy and those kinds of things. I found out that I think I've heard this, that abstinence actually works, but they don't want to discuss that in the classrooms, but they want to go to those other extreme things. So tell me about this bill, this piece of legislation.
Sure. So everybody needs to know when they hear HB 6068, that is the bill number, HB 6068. And it dramatically overhauls the current sex ed curriculum that was developed in a bipartisan way, believe it or not, in 2004 and passed by Jennifer Granholm, the previous Democrat governor. And it has been working. It was a thoughtful curriculum to give children, mostly the teenage years, more of a understanding. And it included abstinence as one of the best ways to avoid, unplanned pregnancies. And it included, a lot of the curriculum was very fair. This curriculum goes way out. This one is now allowing schools to actually distribute family planning drugs and devices without any provision in the bill for parental consent or notification. Right there is a big red flag. I want to know what my children are learning in school. They're my children. How dare politicians think they know more about my kid than them? Than their parents. It's not only that, the sex education classes now will go, as you said, and expand what they're teaching, including about all the different sexual genders and identification, and giving examples. Well, that's not necessary for high schoolers to know. They're pretty savvy. High schools will find out these things. But for a teacher to be teaching, here's all the different ways you can have sex.
Right.
It's unconscionable.
I don't understand. I mean, it used to be, just for biological and educational purposes, this is how babies are made. And this is how and that was kind of the extent and the reason behind it. And it's really been expanded over the years. But the idea that they would do this behind parents' backs, and they wouldn't allow the parents to know about this, just implies that they know that parents would consider these lessons objectionable. Do you think that's why they're not telling parents about this? Because they know they would fight back and push against it.
Absolutely.
So what does that tell you about the program? And it is objectionable, I think, to most parents when if they were to find out what's being taught in here. So that being the case, why do you think there's so many adults in the educational system that support these kinds of lessons and teachings in the schools?
Well, Tom, that's a very good question, especially when, you know, if unplanned pregnancies is your goal to limit unplanned pregnancies, why are you teaching children all these different kinds of ways to get pregnant? and
Right.
and also it's the very notion that we know better than parents, and the notion that parents shouldn't know what we're teaching is very wrong. And in the past, also, I want to say is abstinence is a part of the curriculum. It's not the only thing included. They do go over contraceptives currently, but they include abstinence. Well, this bill also requires that they teach children where and how to obtain an abortion.
Mm.
Well,
It requires that in the bill.
that it also is part of the bill, yes.
You're
So
kidding
it's,
me.
along with the new requirement to teach sexual orientation and gender identity and all the various types of sexual relationships children can. I mean, it's just unconscionable and needs to be defeated. And this bill 6068, you can call the chair of the Education Committee, Representative Matt Kolazar, is going to be going into it is in his committee. And I'm happy to give that number to you.
Please
and
do.
just say,
Please do.
Representative Kolazar, we oppose this bill on so many levels. But first and foremost, parents know better than politicians what and how to teach their children on all these very sensitive issues. His number is 517-373-0854. That's 517-373-0854. And just leave a message if you don't get somebody and say, we want you to know we're very opposed to House Bill 6068, which totally revamps the sex education curriculum for our children, K through 12.
K through 12. All right. House Bill 6068. This whole idea, because there are phrases in here like, bodily autonomy. And on the surface, it sounds good. Like I would think if I was a parent, bodily autonomy means, stay away from me if you're a girl. Stay away from me, young boy. This is my body. Don't touch it. But does it actually mean, does it kind of lean more into this whole abortion argument? Is that really why this is in there, do you think? Is that what it equates to? It's like, okay, bodily autonomy means you have control over your own body. And if you want to have an abortion, that's what that allows.
Right.
Well,
and the fact
very,
that they're
very.
handing out, I mean, now, abortion can be made in Michigan, unfortunately. Anyone who's really seeking an abortion right now, not minors, thankfully, that is the goal of the abortion industry, is that minors can get abortions without parental consent, but that's not true yet. That is not been passed. However, for any woman who's over 18 who wants an abortion, can get one anywhere, anytime, almost any place. Unfortunately, it's enshrined in our state constitution. So to then double down on, okay, now let's get our teenagers having abortions, and here, let's make sure we distribute these family planning drugs and contraceptives and make it very easy for them to possibly, get pregnant. You all know that all these contraceptives don't always work, or if they're not taken at the right time, they don't
Right.
work. So
Yeah.
why in the world would you be handing them out in a school? Why wouldn't you be telling children, wait, this is a big decision, think through all the consequences? But they're not requiring abstinence teaching. And the very fact that they're not requiring it means that there's options to leave it out.
Yeah.
And that's
I think
not
what's
what,
happening here, I mean, this is my take on it. The whole idea is we're going to pass out, condoms and all these, birth control methods. It's really just what they're really saying is we are okay with you having sex. In fact, you should go out and have sex.
Right.
And a lot of the time, they're not going to use the condom. They're not going to use the other birth control methods. They're just going to go out and have sex because these adults in my classroom are saying, that's
You're saying,
okay. And
here's
let's
how
do
you
that. And,
cannot
and
be
they're
pregnant.
indirectly funding the Planned Parenthood, the abortion industry by doing that because many of these kids are going to get pregnant and
Yeah.
they will be encouraged by the same people who passed out the condoms to get an abortion. I mean, that's to me what's happening here. So it's another way to fund Planned Parenthood or other abortion clinics.
Yeah.
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 All right.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you this because there's a lot on here. I know there's a Michigan lawmakers. They're debating this bill that would require a court order to remove books that are deemed obscene from libraries. Do you know much about this piece of legislation?
Yeah, I can touch on that. That is it's House Bill 6034 and 6035. And what it would do would be to protect explicit materials and remove local control. Right now, the library districts, you all have library boards of people who are elected to your library board to represent you. And so when an issue arises with the books that you're seeing, and especially at the lower level shelves or things that younger children can get, and parents have an issue, they can approach and go to the library district's boards and say, we're very concerned about this. This shouldn't be here, or can you move it, or why is it here? There's an option. There's a public place for parents to approach their library school districts. These bills would remove that. It would put all the authority in one executive director of the library school board, and who would be able to make the decision. And if a parent wants to push it, he or she would have to go to court, like you mentioned, to get the book removed or to make changes, which could take up to a year. And of course, we're parents. We have busy lives. Why should parents even have to worry about this? Where has common sense gone? And why are I think library school districts don't want the pushback, but that's too bad.
Mm-hmm.
That's what parents are for. Parents are supposed to be engaged in what their children are reading and learning. And now we're not talking about adults. If adults want to, pick up books that you wouldn't pick up or I wouldn't, fine. But we're talking about libraries that serve children, And so
Yes.
why wouldn't a parent be able to approach a school board and say, hey, let's discuss this. Why are you having this book here? Or is it at the inappropriate place? Should it be in this room? If you want to, there's all kinds of options, but to remove the option itself is just disgusting. I'm sorry. And it's taking away local control.
Yes. It's framed also by Democrats as kind of an anti-censorship piece of legislation,
Yeah.
like don't ban books. But in reality, you are allowed to ban obscene materials from these they're not fitting. They're not fit for most people anyway, anybody, I don't think, but they're not, especially for young minds that are still developing. And they want these in these libraries for a specific reason, which in and of itself is highly concerning. What other bills are you looking at in this lame duck session that you're really concerned how the vote is going to come out and if they get passed, what that will do to the state of Michigan?
Yeah, there's another big one, Tom. Thanks for asking. That for me is very, very concerning because it affects not only public schools but would affect Christian schools, homeschoolers, and it's a expansion or another definition put into place within the civil rights law that we have right now. Now, as everyone knows, or maybe you don't, the civil rights law in Michigan was expanded last year to redefine sex. And sex was redefined from just being male, female. Of course, we're not for discrimination of anyone based on their sex or on their religion or on anything else. But they redefined sex to mean also or include sexual identity and gender, sexual orientation and gender identity. Well, now they want to take it a step further and add harassment as a qualifier. So if you are, it would allow you to be considered guilty based on a perception that you are harassing somebody, rather than a clearly defined standard. So harassment is defined by perception instead of a standard, and that opens the door for all kinds of um, really violations of our free speech and religious conscience. Because how does that work? Well, if I'm a Christian school teacher and I'm teaching about the biblical um, uh, the biblical definition and identity of how we believe we are created male and female according to Genesis.
Yes.
And someone happens to be in that class. Maybe they're in this Christian school because the parents know it's good education, but their child comes home and says, "Oh, well, that's just mom. They said that," and the parents get upset and they're saying, "You're harassing my children by saying, it can only be male or female." I mean, there's the way this is so broadly written is what's disturbing, because
Yes.
it can be used in so many ways that maybe it's not intended. I think the drafter of the bill thinks, no, you're misinterpreting. Well, no,
Uh-huh.
according to the law, if you're allowing a perception to be perceived as a reason for you're guilty, I mean, think about all the ways you can say things to people and they might perceive it completely wrong. Do you
Yes.
think you should be fined or thrown in jail?
No. And that's exactly what this does. And I'm glad you brought this up, because we saw the way, like Proposal 3, for example, was written with very vague terminology in order to enact the legislation we're now discussing. So when you write something like the perceived, the perception that you're being, whatever, intimidated, or somebody doesn't use what you believe to be the correct pronoun for you, you can take that. And I've seen this many times over as being threatened or attacked. And if you feel that way, or you perceive, or you're pretending that you perceive that that's what the intent was, that person would now be guilty of hate speech, right?
Right.
That's the
Right.
concern here, right?
Right.
And that is that legitimate? Is that a legitimate concern? I mean, could that actually, in your view, occur here in this country?
Absolutely, because look at how parents in Virginia, this kind of all started, what, 3
Yep.
years ago in Virginia,
Hmm.
when parents dared to approach a school board and say, "We don't like this, what you're teaching in the school. We want it removed." The parents eventually were even targeted, from what I'm understanding, by the FBI as some kind of domestic terrorist. And that led to the creation of Moms for Liberty. When parents can't go and express their concerns to a school board, a public school board, this is the problem, because this bill opens the door for a public school board. Say a public school parent is concerned about a boy being allowed onto a girls' volleyball team, or some other sport, and they're like, this is not right. I don't want my daughter to have a boy in her locker room or in her bathroom because she's playing volleyball, and he wants to be on her team because he identifies as a girl. Well, that might be considered harassment according to this bill.
Yes. And I've had discussions with various members of the media, who are newspapers in Detroit, for example, and they would write these columns saying that this is all made up. This is far right extremism, claiming that if somebody feels threatened, the perpetrator could be guilty of a hate crime and thus thrown into jail. The fact of the matter, it is true, and it's not that we're basing this on just some fantasy or ethereal concept in our heads. It's playing out in real time in other countries. The United Kingdom actively does this right now. In fact, very recently, I forget which police agency, I think it was the National Police Agency in the United Kingdom, wanted to lock up Elon Musk because on Elon Musk's platform X, somebody had said something that turned out to be false. And that false statement, which was not hateful, but it led to protests where some people got injured, and those injuries now, if you go back and you reverse engineer it, leads to Elon Musk because of what he allowed speech-wise on his platform. Therefore, Elon Musk would be guilty of a hate crime, as a result. So this thing happens all the time in these other countries. In
Yeah.
Canada is another one. These are like Western society countries that are already implementing these types of hate crimes there, and people are going to prison as a result of it, or just being fined in and of itself. To say that that can't happen, and this piece of legislation in and of itself wouldn't lead to that, I think is just naive.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's definitely naive, Tom. We've seen it play out over and over. And, let's be clear, we are not calling for discrimination of these young children who are truly maybe confused about their gender. That's the last thing I want. But we don't inflict on the general population that's 99.999% who are not transgender a rule or some kind of vague, broad definition of harassment that could affect someone's parents going to jail simply because of a perceived harassment statement made. That's not how we have the rule of law in America. And, this bill would be shot down in a heartbeat by the United States Supreme Court. But let's get back to reality and common sense. What parent in what school district even has the funds to take something all the way to the Supreme Court? And it is unconstitutional. So why would we even begin to put this into our own Michigan law?
Right.
There's no need for it. There's no
not.
need for it.
We had a guest on earlier this week who identifies as a female born a male. And that individual said that the people that harass her and threaten to kill her most often are the liberals who, when she disagrees on their perceived narrative when it comes to transgenderism on certain topics. And if this person goes and speaks against it, they've threatened to kill her multiple times. And these are far left. And this individual also says, it's the conservatives that come around me to protect my life.
Right.
So that was very telling about really where the danger is coming from. And I guess I'll end on this because you can categorize this kind of speech to any individual. Like I get harassed a lot by a lot of people, and it's based on different, characteristic traits of my own. Like, for example, I'm a Christian. And, technically, I guess that would be called a protected class because it's religion, but people will harass me because of my belief in Jesus Christ. I would never, ever, and I've never thought this, that person should be put in prison or fined based on what they said to me, even if it was offensive. And I don't often take offense to it. I just think, okay, this person, in my view, is lost. It needs more care and love and truth spoken into that individual. But so I guess the constitutional perspective of this, should there be certain protected classes? Like some people are allowed to be harassed, which we are, and some are not based on some mutable trait that they have, or maybe a moral decision that they have made in their life. Is that in any way constitutional?
No, it's not. In fact, even the change to the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act last February, and should a Christian business owner get sued based on that change, and he took it to the Supreme Court, I firmly believe, based on my conversations with constitutional attorneys, that it would be shot down and declared unconstitutional. So, and this is a further expansion of that. And so at its heart, at its very core, it's unconstitutional in America. And we don't make laws that are based on somebody's perception. There has to be a very clear standard outline if you were even to do this. But we're not suggesting we do it. But right now, the way it's written, it's based on someone's perception of guilt.
Yes.
That is not how we make laws.
Mm-mm.
And it will lead to so much destruction. And when you think about those who push these kind of laws, I mean, in my sphere, and maybe yours and others, in people who are just trying to live their lives, it doesn't arise. And if you have a strong opinion, that's what America's all about, is that you discuss them, you debate them, you try and persuade. You don't create fines and laws and throw people in jail because they said something you disagree with.
Right. And that's what this will lead to. And so it's a lame duck session right now, and there's a lot of proposed policies that are leaning heavily on expanding these progressive social changes that should not be expanded in the state. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. What's the website again that people can go to?
So CTV Michigan, all spelled out, .org. Charlie
Okay.
Tango Victor.
Yeah, now you're speaking our
CTV.
language.
Yeah.
It's a great place to
CTV.
go. A lot of resources there, a lot of people and contacts that we have a right to contact because our elected leaders and share with them how you feel about this legislation. Eileen McNeil, it's so good to talk to you, president of Citizens for Traditional Values. You're doing amazing work. Keep it up. Stay strong.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you. Always good to speak with Eileen. It's a lot of good work they're doing over there. So we have some comments here. I want to get to those, then I'm going to get into another interview. So we got quite a few here. I'll take a couple now. I got a quick other interview, and then we'll get back to your comments and your questions. So let's bring them up, maybe a couple here. From the engineer, Tom, I believe it's Senate Bill 1117 called the Deceptive Color Law. Many duck hunters have their guns colored in a real tree camo. That will be illegal. My rep can't tell me how this will stop crime because they can't. You're absolutely right about this. If there's different colored guns, that's somehow going to be illegal because the thinking of the ostensible reason for this that they're giving is that, well, kids might think they're toys and then they'll take them. Well, you should have a right to, I mean, like you just said, it's going to be, that's the reason behind it, the engineer, but I don't think I think it's disingenuous. The real reason is take away your guns. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a very important piece of legislation as well. Thank you. Let's bring up one more comment real quick. Harry Sakilian. Good morning, Tom. Hey, Harry, how are you, buddy? Hope you had a nice Thanksgiving. I did. I hope you did as well. Do you know if there is any crime a president cannot pardon or sentence that cannot be commuted? Thanks, Harry Sakilian. I don't know of one, actually. I think the president can even pardon himself, if he had committed crimes. And that's what my concern is here with Hunter Biden. Like the fact that he not only pardoned him from the crime that he was charged and convicted of, he pardoned him on that. His sentencing was coming up for those two different crimes this month. He pardoned him for that, but not just that, any other crimes that he may have committed over the past 10 years. So it's an obvious admission of guilt of other crimes. So anything he has done, a blanket pardon, if something comes up, he pardoned him for that. It's amazing. I've never seen this happen. You've heard of specific crimes, and someone's been pardoned for maybe murder or the sentence has been commuted or whatever it is. But pardoning crimes that no one knows about yet seems to me to be an admission that there are some crimes out there that Hunter Biden has committed that to me links the rest of the Biden family to those crimes as well. So this stinks to high heaven. And this Biden family, if this is not evidence enough for anybody who doubted that the Biden family is corrupt and they themselves are the one that believe they are above the law, you've got to, hopefully the veil has been stripped away from your eyes. You can see what the Biden family and a lot of people like him in that particular party, the Democratic Party, feel the same way. All this finger pointing about saying no one is above the law, they don't mean that. They mean we want to prosecute Republicans, but all Democrats are above the law. That's what they mean. And this is just an obvious reality based on what we just saw happen yesterday. Anyway, Harry, good to see you. We'll get more comments in a second. Real quickly, I want to talk about something that has popped up, and I've seen it. Maybe you have as well, but I used to run a lot, and I was injured for my running. I think I tore my meniscus is what that issue was. But a lot of people are being injured from that. Big injuries are occurring from running and also, surprisingly, from pickleball. Pickleball's growing popularity has led to an increase in knee injuries, often caused by poor technique or abrupt movements and prolonged play without proper warm-ups or stretching. So I brought in Dr. Matthew Cade to talk about this. And we're joined again with Dr. Matthew Cade, orthopedic surgeon with Advanced Orthopedic Specialists. Good to see you, Doctor.
Hey, Tom. How are you?
Good. Fantastic. There's a lot of, I enjoy running. That was kind of my sport for a long time. Pickleball is coming up in popularity as well. Unfortunately, with both of those sports, there's injuries that come about. I want to start with running and some of the more common injuries that occur and how we can prevent the injuries the best. For me, I found out that it really does make a difference about what kind of shoes you end up wearing. But what are the more common injuries that are associated with running?
Yeah, a lot of the injuries are what we call like overuse injuries. So like patellar tendonitis, which is the tendon that runs right across the front of your knee. So you're using that constantly for a long period of time when you're running. So you can get some tendonitis. Like we talked, meniscus tears are common. You can even get little stress fractures in your foot. So depending on how you run, so a lot of people run with like forefoot strike. So you put the front of your foot down first, some of the faster runners, and that puts a lot of stress on your metatarsals, which are basically the small bones in your foot that kind of connect to your toes. So that's what you worry about for that. And then there's the other kind of running is heel strike. So you basically put your heel down. Some of the slower people might do that. So you have other issues with that with your heel and bone spurs, but that's kind of where we start.
So, is there a better way to run? Does it matter if it's your heel strike and I think you said the toe strike?
Yeah.
I mean, which one is better?
I would say for a competitive runner, the forefoot strike is better. However, you just have to know how you run and your style. You can tailor your shoes toward that. I think that if you're going to get a minimalist shoe, so not super padded, you can, in your forefoot striker, you could consider that. But if you're a heel striker, you should probably get a bigger soled shoe, like a Hoka or one of those. So
I'm
more
definitely a heel striker. I'm amongst the slower in the categories that you mentioned. Then, how does the arch come into play here?
So the arch, so if it's high or if it's low, it needs to be supported, but correctly. So you don't want too much stress and you don't want not enough stress on your arch. So the best thing to do is go to a running store and they'll measure it for you and tell you exactly where yours lies, and then they'll get you the right insoles.
Is there does it matter, we talk about like the stride and the distance, between, steps, I guess, the stride of a runner. Does that have an impact on injuries?
It does. For the amateur runner, the person who maybe is a little more sedentary at baseline, short strides are better just for stability and making sure that, you don't, twist your ankle or fall. But a competitive runner, long strides is kind of what you're aiming for.
Stretch it out.
Stretch it out.
Speaking about stretching, that's got to be important to prevent injuries as well.
Yeah. All the stuff that we already know. Yeah. So you want to hydrate, you want to stretch, you want to, plan out your trail, where you're going to be. It's a great idea to bring your cell phone with you. Yeah. If you're somewhere a little more remote and you take a fall, you break an ankle, that's really your only lifeline would be your cell phone. So it's always a good idea if you can.
Yeah, a smart thing to do because it does happen a lot. And when you're running, you're going on these trails, and that's the beauty of it. You can go out where no one else is, but then if you get injured, you can call 911 or maybe somebody to come and help pick you up. I want to talk to you about the pickleball. It's the phenomenon now, and I think it's here to stay. I don't think it's just a fad. I think the number of courts that are being built. But one of the common injuries, we talked before about the pickleball elbow, which was prior it was known as tennis elbow. But now the knees are another big factor that we're seeing come out of these competitive pickleball athletes, or just others are just doing it for recreation. Is that something you're seeing in your office as well?
I do, yeah. So if you're having lots of pain, swelling, instability, you really need to get checked out. So things like meniscus tears, things like ligament injuries. So your medial collateral ligament, it's on the inside of your knee. So if you tear that, your knees is going to give out on you and feel unstable. If you tear your ACL, so your anterior cruciate ligament, again, it's going to give out on you. And you'll notice some pretty big swelling, around your knee, and it'll get big. And then again, a lot of the overuse injuries, patellar tendonitis, your quad tendon on top of your knee, all that stuff, we look for. And there can be some more acute kind of traumatic injuries. So if all of a sudden you have lots of weakness in your knee, you could have torn your quadriceps tendon, and that needs surgical repair.
Okay, so how do you know? Like if you're playing pickleball, maybe you think you're just sore. It was a rough day on the court yesterday, and I'll get through this. How do you know it's not that and it's something more serious?
Yeah, if you have pain, swelling, and instability, and it lasts more than a few days, and you can't really walk it off, then you should think about making an appointment and getting it looked at. So, and especially like I said, if it swells and it doesn't want to move for you, you should get it looked at sooner than later.
Yeah, if it doesn't want to move for you, that's a pretty
Yeah,
significant
so-
thing. It's not good for your pickleball game anyway.
No, with the meniscus tears, if it's big enough, you can get what's called a locked meniscus, which means it's so big that your knee won't really move. It's locked. So, and it's so big that you need to have surgery sooner than later.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting.
yeah.
I didn't know there was such a big difference in dichotomy between the
yeah.
different types of tears. So if you had, let's say it's a minor torn meniscus, whatever that looks like, from your perspective, are there other options than just surgery, or is to really finally fix the issue, is surgery really the way to go?
Not always. So we like to start with physical therapy. Sometimes if that meniscus tear, if it's small and it stays out of the way and it kind of scars down away from the joint surface, some people can do PT and they have good outcomes. But if you fail PT, like 4 to 6 weeks, then usually I tell people if it's severe symptoms, you should probably get it fixed.
Yeah, a month or a month and a half in should be a pretty good indicator.
Yeah.
There's also stories of audible popping noises or audible like crunching noises in the knee, and I guess that can result from cartilage damage or maybe conditions that lead to different types of pain syndromes. What should players not dismiss when they're hearing something like that? It maybe sounds harmless, but if it's crunching, maybe that is indicative of something more serious.
If it's brand new, you should get it looked at. If you have kind of creaky knees that click and pop from some arthritis normally, and you hear it, that's one thing. But if it's brand new, you should really get it looked at.
What about bruising on the knee? Visible bruising, is that indicative of something more serious, or is just common?
Yeah. I mean, that shouldn't, unless you fell on your knee. If you did not like traumatize the knee and you have some bruising, could indicate like a tendon tear or ligament tear. Because when things tear inside your knee, there's little tiny blood vessels throughout, and they'll bleed just a little bit, and then it creates the bruising. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So something to look. Yeah.
those are a little more concerning.
Yeah, I would say it would be for sure. A lot of times I'll wake up in the morning, I'm feeling stiff. I'm kind of whatever, it's my neck or my back or maybe my legs or my knees. I attribute it to the fact I'm just getting older. I'm not as flexible as I used to be. But is morning stiffness, and particularly in the knee, especially after you've been inactive, is that something I hear about it? Is that something that indicates something more serious?
Not necessarily. So if you are more sedentary and then you have vigorous exercise all of a sudden, your body is going to build up a lot of inflammation. So it can be normal. That should resolve over the span of, weeks, kind of as you ease into your workout. But again, if it's more consistent, it's not going away, you should get it looked at. But if you're sedentary and all of a sudden you run 2 or 3 miles, you're going to be sore in the morning until you get acclimated to it. And I would also say, just a quick disclaimer for running or pickleball, if you're relatively sedentary and you have any kind of heart disease, diabetes, if you're a smoker, anything that hasn't been evaluated and maybe isn't under control, you should get evaluated by like a medical doctor before you go, because some of those things are a ticking time bomb. So if you have coronary artery disease that's not diagnosed and you have some like constricted vessels in your heart, and then all of a sudden you run 3 miles, that's a big shock to the system. So
very good, good advice. It's also even if that's not the case, and you get checked out, and you kind of have a clean bill of health. In effect, if you haven't run a lot, you should probably work your way up to it. Don't start off with 3 to 5 miles. Maybe start with a half-mile jaunt or maybe a mile walk or something of that nature.
Yeah, I definitely tell people to let pain guide you. Pain and discomfort. So discomfort versus pain. So you're going to have discomfort when you're working out, but it shouldn't be pain and it shouldn't be consistent.
Okay.
So.
All right. So people have questions or comments, or they want to get hold of you. How do they do that?
Yeah, they can get me on Facebook at Dr. Matthew Cade. You can also on Instagram, Dr. Cade Orthopedics.
Okay, wonderful. Always good to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Dr. Dr. Matthew Cade, a good guy and good advice here. By the way, if you are sedentary, don't go on that 3-mile run right away. I was training one time for a Tough Mudder in Chicago, and it's like a 10-mile obstacle course run and walk thing. And I bring that up because it's one of the greatest accomplishments of my life, and I want you to know all about it. but the thing was, I'm kidding. But I didn't start off with 10 miles. I had to work my way up because I was pretty sedentary. I have a job where I do a lot of writing and sit behind a computer. So I went with my daughters, 2 of my daughters, and we started walking. And I remember we went for the first 4-mile walk. It seemed horrendous to me, but a couple months down the road, that was a breeze. Lickety split. I can do that running, no problem whatsoever. So work your way up to it. Your body adapts, but of course, make sure you see a medical doctor. Make sure you got a clean bill of health before you do all of this. All right, listen. Thanks for waiting around here. I want to get to your comments now, some of your questions. Let's bring them up one by one. It's Christopher Jakulski. Hey, Christopher, good to have you back here. One more link in a chain of broken promises from the Biden administration. Good riddance. January 20th can get here soon enough, but in the meantime, let's do Christmas well. Amen, Christopher. Yeah, let's do Christmas well. But you're right. This is a pattern, right? Have you noticed? You've noticed, Christopher, but most people, if they haven't seen it, Joe Biden has not told the truth many different times. Or if that's not the situation, then I don't know what to call it. Maybe he just keeps changing his mind about what happened and what didn't happen, what he's going to do, what he's not going to do. In any case, you can't trust what he says. And you haven't been for not just the past 4 years, decades. If you look back to his comments when he was running for Senate and when he was a young man, but way back then, he kind of, at the very best, embellishes things. Thanks, Christopher. Let's bring up another one here. It is Jeannie Euler. Hi, Jeannie. I am not surprised at all. Honestly, as a parent, I'd probably do the same. Okay, I get that. Absolutely. Jeannie, and by the way, happy birthday, Jeannie. I happen to know her. It was her birthday a couple days ago. Was it a couple days? What is today? I don't know. Yesterday. Yesterday was her birthday. Yeah, you're right. As a parent, you want to do what's best for your kids, and I get that aspect. That's why he was asked that question, though, so many times, again and again, to the point where the White House got sick of, listen, we've answered this question ad nauseum. The answer is no, he will not pardon his son. Period. Full stop. They like to say that term, full stop. No more questions about this, because if you don't believe us, that's your fault. Well, we don't believe you because we knew it was going to change, and a lot of parents would say, I'd like to pardon my son. The weird thing about this, though, this is what I would not have done, and Joe Biden did, is that he didn't pardon him just for his crimes that he committed. He pardoned him for crimes that nobody knows about yet, like blanket immunity for the past 10 years. So if you bring up Burisma, nope, can't charge him with that. If you bring up murder, I'm not saying he committed murder, but even if he did, can't charge him for that. I mean, he's like total immunity diplomat type of thing going on here with Hunter Biden. So it does pay to be in a position of privilege and power, like within the Biden family. All right, Jeannie Euler, good to see you. Thank you. Let's bring up another one here. It is from Arlene Pearson. Joe Biden has always lied. Well said, Arlene. Good to see you, by the way. Prevented him from receiving DNC approval for presidency in the 80s. You're right about that. Mainstream media, MSM, and DNC's Democratic National Committee values changed over the decades. The Democratic Party appears willing to do anything for power, as evidenced by promoting and electing Joe Biden, a self-serving, lying candidate with dementia. Yeah, Arlene, I don't see how people don't see this. It's so blatantly obvious, and it has been for quite some time. I just think that people are not getting the full story. Like, for example, if what we happen to research regarding all the very legitimate and severe and serious accusations against Joe Biden specifically, as it just relates to the stuff that came out on that laptop regarding him and his involvement with overseas shenanigans, if you want to call it that, with our enemies, with China, with Russia, and the millions that we're making from these countries, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, you can go down the list of where Joe Biden was involved while vice president in getting his son these lucrative business deals, and apparently he took a percentage of it. He took a cut. So those things are very, very serious. But the problem is, and the reason why people I don't think see as clearly as Arlene does, is because they don't have time to do all the research. So you rely on a dishonest media. So when you talk about lying Biden, there's also a lying news media outlet that's in step with Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, who just wants to remain in power, as you so eloquently put it. Arlene, thanks so much. Let's bring up one more, maybe two more here. Chris Ritz, Tom, the pardon is as much about protecting Joe. Yes, this will hinder investigations. I think it's a reaction to the Kash appointment. Kash Patel, the appointment. You're right. I wanted to get into that today, but we don't have time. But yeah, Kash Patel was appointed by Donald Trump to be the director of the FBI. And what he wants to do is specifically dealing with stuff like this, where the Biden administration interferes with investigations. They not only interfered with investigations to prosecute Donald Trump or to go after you and me, conservative citizens, and censor what they do on Twitter, or they convict people who happen to protest very peacefully abortions outside of these centers. They go into jail, but then they let skirt all the fire bombings of these pregnancy resource centers. They don't charge those people. They don't go after them at all. You see this difference in the two-tier justice system, blatantly obvious. Kash Patel is going to come in and do away with it. He's going to strip it out. Joe Biden also very much involved his administration in the investigation into Hunter Biden. Remember the IRS investigation into Hunter's serious tax felonies that he had committed, that the Biden administration stepped in and prevented these investigators from investigating their son. And that's why these whistleblowers finally came out, one of them being a liberal Democrat. So we can't do our investigation because the Department of Justice under Joe Biden is prohibiting us from doing it, which they've never done before with any other investigation. So Kash Patel comes in. The FBI, good guy, understands the real threats to this country, working in tandem with the Department of Justice, which the FBI sits underneath, I think is going to do a lot of good. And justice will now prevail. It won't be two-tiered, as the Democrats have just been doing this for far too long. We have time for one more comment, then we'll have to say so long. Jordan Genso, when Trump stated on October 24th, that he was open to pardoning Hunter, did you view that as an egregious position? No, Jordan, I didn't. But he was pardoning him for... You're missing the point, I think, Jordan. And I appreciate your comment. But notice the difference. Donald Trump said that he'd be open to it. Joe Biden said he wouldn't be open to it. So Joe Biden lied. So that's the issue. That's what's egregious. It's in step with Joe Biden's character. You can't believe anything that comes out of his mouth. So that's number one. Number two, why is this so unprecedented? He didn't just pardon him for the crimes that he was convicted of. He pardoned, it's a blanket pardon for anything he did wrong that we don't even yet know about, or maybe we'll never know about. Likely we'll never know about it because this will, as our other commenter said, this will prevent any other further investigations into Hunter Biden. It's an admission of guilt. That's what's egregious here, Jordan. And I hope, listen, you're a very smart guy, and I hope you're intellectually honest enough to say, yeah, what Joe Biden did here was egregious because, hey, he lied that he wasn't going to even consider a pardon for him because he respects somehow our justice system, which he doesn't unless he's in charge of it. And number two, he pardoned him for anything he made. If he steals a lollipop, we find out he stole a lollipop in 2018, and the statute of limitations hasn't run out, he can't be charged with that. Even if the grocery store wants to charge Hunter Biden for that. But even more so, it's the lollipop stealing, it's the murder, and anything in between that, no charges. You can't even look at it, look the other way. If it started in 2014 to current day, 2024, that's egregious. So no, what Donald Trump said was great. He was honest. Hey, I'd consider pardoning him. That was a wonderful thing he did. It was not egregious, not in the least. But I always appreciate your comments, Jordan Genso. Thank you so much. Then thank you for watching. Appreciate all your comments as well. Reminder to check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well, YouTube, X, Facebook. Like, share the content. That helps us out a great deal. And don't forget to join us back here. Got a great show coming up tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. We're streaming live. Then it lives again in perpetuity on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, X, Facebook, and all the other ones out there as well, YouTube as well. God bless you. Thank you so much.